we have a lack of information to the brain perpetuating the stress response. And that's where chiropractic comes in. We get movement into the spine, particularly in the upper cervical area, that turns off the nociception, turns off the stress response, restores proprioceptive input, restores balance in this autonomic nervous system, which then God created our bodies to heal, to be self-organizing, self-healing. And so when you're in that balanced state of ease and stress, more in the ease state, your body will start to heal itself and peel back the layers of trauma that the body has kind of adapted to and continued to compensate for.
Welcome to the Natural Health Matters podcast, where it's all about maximizing your health potential so that you can look and feel your best at any age. I'm your host, David Sandstrom, naturopathic doctor and biblical health coach, and this is episode number 81. Today we have on the show Dr. Chris Boman. Dr. Chris runs Trailhead Family Chiropractic, a cutting-edge wellness center in Murrieta, California. He specializes in compassionate chiropractic care for babies, kids, and moms-to-be. He also caters to the special population children, including those with Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy, and ADHD. Dr. Chris, welcome to Natural Health Matters.
Thank you so much for having me, David.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on. I love talking to people like you because we're very like-minded, and I know that you have a passion to help people. So could you give the Natural Nation, the listeners, just a 35,000-foot view about what you do with your practice?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it all starts with how I think, as a practitioner. I originally wanted to be a sports chiropractor. And it wasn't until my second year in chiropractic school, I was at a chiropractic seminar, and one of my mentors now stood from stage and was talking the work that he'd been doing with kids. And he said a quote that still gives me goosebumps today. He said, "I can't imagine how frightening it must be for kids to be locked out of a world that they want to be a part of." And I knew from that moment that my life was not going to be dedicated to 22 athletes on a football field destroying themselves. It was going to be to the moms that are looking for answers that the medical system isn't giving them, that maybe the medical system caused. And I'm going to provide a natural solution, a drug-free solution, a root cause solution to issues like you talked about in my intro, also things like colic and ear infections, and provide certainty in parenting and just empower and equip moms and parents, dads too, obviously, to raise their kids in a way that they're comfortable with, that they feel comfortable with, rather than just being dependent on medicine and the medical system to tell them what to do, when to do it, how to do it, only to be shrugged off to the side when something goes wrong.
Excellent. And I love that quote that you just gave us about kids that want to be a part of the world, but are just struggling to do that. Can you go a little deeper in that?
Yeah. He was talking specifically about kids with autism. The immediate thing that your mind goes to is that, kids that are nonverbal, or kids that, struggle with rage or impulsivity or extreme anxiety, like a lot of these kids do, would like to play soccer, would like to be in a neurotypical class, would like to ride the bus or have birthday parties or go do a sleepover. It's a world that they want to be a part of, but their disabilities have kind of locked them out of it. We've kind of extrapolated it even further to kids that are dependent on antibiotics or kids that are dependent on medications. They can't live life to their optimal potential because medicine is influencing the neurology, it's influencing their physiology to be locked in to a certain even keel rather than expressing the highs and lows of life. And I think those highs and lows is what shape and form you and form your identity and give you an opportunity to pursue passion and stay away from things that you don't agree with and resonate with. If you're just kind of a zombie going through life, dependent on another system, you don't get a chance to form opinions. You don't get a chance to be independent. You don't get a chance to be uniquely you. And I think that's taking away the purpose of what that person can become. And you're just kind of a sidecar to whatever medicine, whatever your parents, whatever society says you should be. And I think that's a lost asset to society. Someone that's just zombied out on Adderall or on any of those other medications that kind of just change you at your core. And so my goal is to really unlock these kids' potential, take them out of a state of stress into a state of ease so that they don't have to be dependent on a medical system and they can actually engage with the world. They can tell their moms, I love you. They can have a relationship with other kids. They can play sports. They can engage in a relatively neurotypical lifestyle. Even though they might always have limitations, their limitations aren't going to define them. They're going to be a part of what makes them unique and give them their competitive advantage.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. Jesus said that he came to give us life and life abundant. And that includes kids with ADHD or autism or any of the other things you spoke of. In your experience, what do you do with those kids? I mean, if mom comes in with an autistic kid, how do you start your treatment, and how do you get to know that person, and what do you do with them?
Yeah, great question. I'm sure you've probably heard the phrase too. You meet one kid with autism, you meet one kid with autism. Every case is unique and different. But luckily, we have a process that can stay relatively the same, because I believe we're going at the root cause of the issue. So no matter the symptoms that you have, whether it is autism, ADHD, cancer, diabetes, all those things, it doesn't change the way we think and the way we practice as chiropractors. The actual application of chiropractic might change, based on the person's symptomatology or sensitivities. But basically, what we would do is we do an in-depth consultation. So we figure out, what happened. Has it been like this in birth? Was there a event that kind of triggered regression? What therapies have you done? What medications are you on, or doctors, considering? Where are you at? What are your hopes, for your kid? What are your kids' limitations? What are they, like and want to do? And then I could just go through the basic philosophy of chiropractic, which, if you don't mind, I'll share now. And that
Absolutely.
kind of
Please,
explains.
please do. That's a great thing to talk about.
Cool. Yeah. And that kind of explains the testing that we do, and then, the treatment that we do after that. So basically what I tell my parents is your worldview is shaped on the balance of your nervous system. And full well, you have your autonomic nervous system, which is kind of a yin and a yang. You have your sympathetic, which is your fight or flight, kind of response reaction that happens when your body's in a state of stress, or there's a perceived state of stress. You have your parasympathetic part of your nervous system, which is your rest, digest, state of healing. Strong delta wave is when it's the part of your autonomic nervous system that you want to live in, not necessarily your sympathetic nervous system. That's reactive. You want to stay proactive, kind of in your parasympathetic. However, when your body is kind of overwhelmed with stress, your nervous system gets overloaded, either from a chemical trauma. That could be things like pharmaceuticals. That could be things like polluted air from mold, or stuff that they're spraying, polluted water. It could be from a emotional trauma, so something that happened in pregnancy, a divorce, mom lost her job, or a stressful, situation during pregnancy, or during that labor, delivery, birth process. There's some stressful event that sends off chemicals that the baby is then able to read and get overwhelmed. Or physical trauma, once again, from pregnancy, from the birth process, such as a C-section, vacuum, forceps delivery, a delivery, fast birth process, super long birth process. All these things influence ultimately the movement of the spine. Okay, when the body gets stuck in a state of stress, that causes your muscles to tighten up, which limits movement in your spine. Now, to talk about it, two more technical words, and I think that's all the technical words that I use. When your spine is moving the way it's supposed to, it sends what we call proprioceptive or soothing feedback, awareness to the brain about what's going on in your environment. When your spine stops moving the way it's supposed to, that switches from proprioceptive to what we call nociceptive feedback, which is nauseous, stress, pain signals to the brain that trigger, once again, that fight or flight, or perpetuate that fight or flight process. So in a baby, that looks like maybe torticollis, where the muscles stay tight and the baby can't turn its head. Or that looks like colic, or it looks like ear infections. All these things are symptoms of chronic stress, whether that's a minute, 10 minutes, or 10 months old. If the body is in a state of stress, it's going to be responding and sending messages to the brain, to your consciousness, and an expression of symptoms. So symptoms are effects of dysfunction, the dysfunction because of stress. And so chiropractors come in, and we do what we do in our office. We do 2 scans. On babies, we really only do one, which is a infrared thermography scan, which helps us measure the difference of skin temperature from one side to the other. The bigger the difference, the more inflammation. And most commonly what we're seeing in babies, especially with autism, ADHD, any of alphabet soup of neurodevelopmental disorders, we're seeing a high level of stress right at the upper cervical spine. And the reason why we're seeing that is most likely due to the birth process. And the reason why we're so concerned about that is because of the nerve that lives up there called the vagus nerve, which is, I don't know, what, 80% of your parasympathetic influence. So that rest, relax influence to the digestive system, to the neuroendocrine system, to all those different systems that are on the inside. If you're having stress at the upper cervical spine, that's going to default your body into this vagus nerve is in a sense going to turn off. Default becomes stress, and then your body is no longer responding to a stressful stimulus from the outside. It's now responding to a perceived stress due to the lack of input from proprioception and from the vagus nerve. And so then you get in this stress cycle where you started with neck pain or an ear infection, that turns into digestive system problem, that turns into a lack of serotonin or dopamine, which turns into a lack of neural development. And you kind of just get one thing at a time. There's in my slides that I go through when I teach seminars, I kind of walk through a progression of a baby that has a stressful birth process. They start to get ear infections. They get antibiotics, which runs the infection deeper. They start to get tonsillitis and strep throat, which they take the tonsils out, which drives the infection deeper. It turns into a lung infection. So they get asthma, allergies, and then they're on albuterol, which stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. And it just drives things one step further until you have an autism diagnosis. And so when we talk about, in a sense, a treatment plan, our goal is to start at the root cause, because there's a lot of things that happen. And the root is you have a lack of information to the brain perpetuating the stress response. And that's where chiropractic comes in. We get movement into the spine, particularly in the upper cervical area, that turns off the nociception, turns off the stress response, restores proprioceptive input, restores balance in this autonomic nervous system, which then God created our bodies to heal, to be self-organizing, self-healing. And so when you're in that balanced state of ease and stress, more in the ease state, your body will start to heal itself and peel back the layers of trauma that the body has kind of adapted to and continue to compensate for. And so that's why we can help as chiropractors, whether it's autism, ear infections, colic, AD, all of the like. I don't say chiropractors are the end all be all. Obviously nutrition is going to play a role in it. Detoxing is going to play a role in it. Continued movement through exercise is going to play a role in it. Healthy spiritual and mental practices is going to play a role in it. But it's why I believe every person should be seeing a chiropractor in addition to, all the other therapies such as OT, speech, ABA, occupational therapy, and all those sort of things, because that treats the periphery. This treats the root cause of what's going on. So that's that.
Yeah, no, that you said a lot. That was mouthful. You said a lot there. Thank you for that.
Yep.
So yeah, it's my contention that we maximize our health potential when we align our lives more fully with God's natural design for spirit, mind, and body. And we can, that covers a lot. But what you're talking about here is having a chiropractor as part of your team. Right? It's like a football team has a massage therapist. They have trainers. They have people that treat emergencies on the field. They, the whole team of people to support those players. And in the same way, when we're playing in the game of life, we should have a team that supports us. Now, we're in charge, right? It's not the doctor or the practitioner that's in charge of our health. We're responsible for that, and we make our own decisions. But hopefully we're making informed decisions by consulting with our team members, kind of like the president consults with his cabinet. We get expert input, take it all together, and make some choices, hopefully, that will improve our health in a holistic fashion. One of the things you mentioned there was, you didn't use the word, but you talked about it, polypharmacy. So somebody has an issue, then an ear infection, then they take antibiotics, and now they got a dysbiosis in their gut, and now they got irritable bowel, and that weakens their immune system even further, and now they've got I don't know, too many colds and flus in the course of a year. So do you see that quite a bit? And is it your opinion that a lot of the times what doctors or any other practitioner for that matter are treating is symptoms and not going after the root cause?
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. And the main reason why is medical doctors are trying to please the parents and stay under the radar of insurance companies. So they really just go through standard of care, what's going to filter a mom through fastest. And then I believe that they either start or continue to have good hearts and that they want to see a baby get better. But the only tools in their arsenal really are medications or primary prevention in vaccines, but there's nothing for ear infections, colic, or anything like that in their arsenal. And so it's why they are starting to prescribe antidepressants. It's why they're starting to really just prescribe a symptom or a medication for a symptom instead of looking at how everything is working together. I have multiple friends that have just been through nursing school, and obviously they're communicating with doctors and asking questions and whatnot. And most of them, even in nursing school, get less than a semester of nutrition.
Most medical school programs give their students about 1 or 2 days worth of nutrition in 4 years of college.
And it's a travesty because if they believe that you can give you a medication and it'll influence your emotions, it'll influence the way you think, it'll influence your digestive system, they can influence anything with the medication, then why not believe your bananas will influence your muscles, or different things will influence the way your body functions? It just doesn't make sense to me.
How about the Fruit Loops or the Hot Pocket?
On the other side of it, exactly right.
I've got 4 kids, and my wife and I noticed, especially when they were younger, a massive difference in their behavior when they had food coloring, like red dye number 40 in something. They go to a party and they'd have a cupcake and they've had some frosting on the top and it's loaded with chemical food coloring. And all of a sudden, my kid starts behaving in a totally different fashion than what we're used to. That it's just, they can't control it. It's the we are what we eat, right? Our body has to take what we put inside and turn that into us. And us includes our behavior, our mental emotional state. And for a child that has less self-control, those can be quite visible to a parent that's willing to notice.
I agree. Yeah. And the problem is they don't get any reinforcement from their medical doctor. What they ask, why is my kid so crazy, or, whatever. And they don't talk about, well, how much TV are they watching? What are they eating? It's kind of just like, oh, well, there's a medication for anxiety, or there's a medication for hyperactivity. Do you want to try it?
Right. Well, one of the things that's really near and dear to my heart is, and it's a bit controversial. So, let's respect people that have differences of opinion. But when it comes to childhood vaccines, there's a school of thought out there that says that these are harmful and they should be avoided. And then there's a school of thought that says, oh, well, the greatest thing since sliced cake. So, a quick story. When my oldest daughter was about 2 years old, we were at the pediatrician's office. I forget what we were doing there. We didn't do well visits, but there was a mom sitting across the bench from us on the other side of the room, and she had a child with her, and she said, "Are you guys here for a well visit?" We said, "Well, we don't really call it that, but yeah, we're here." She said, "You're not going to get the MMR vaccine, are you?" I was like, "Well, we're not planning on that." And she burst into tears. And she said, "I had a perfectly healthy 3-year-old child. I took him in for the MMR vaccine. The next day, he was completely full-blown autistic. He hasn't looked me in the eyes since." And she said this with tears in her eyes. So, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that vaccines should be considered helpful. However, we should use them with caution. There can be some benefits to vaccines, but there can be some detrimental side effects as well. So what's your position on childhood vaccines? And again, let's just be respectful to people that have differences of opinion.
Yeah. Well, first of all, as a chiropractor, technically vaccines are outside of my scope. So what I'm saying is not, medical advice, don't do this or not do that. Always consult your physician for something that's inside of their scope and not mine. So my goal is to come at this from a root cause practitioner. I just like to ask questions. I think a lot of people, first of all, use vaccines as a crutch to not actually do further research on how to raise their kids in a healthy way. They kind of say they got their vaccine, so I don't need to worry about their immune system because they're not going to get or suffer from a lot of these childhood diseases, including the flu or whatever that other kids might get. And I don't think that is the right approach. I think we should understand how the immune system works, how the digestive system works, how the nervous system integrates and organizes it all. I think parents, because they don't have a medical degree, thinks that that's outside of their scope of parenting, that I don't have to understand that. That's what my doctor's, there for. I think you can look at it in the same things like education. It's like, why are you fighting for your right to educate your kid the way you want to, but you just delegate your kid's health because you don't have a medical degree? With the amount of information out there, like this podcast, I'm sure this isn't the first discussion that you've had about vaccines or natural health or the immune system or anything like that. You can become as informed or more informed about your child's developing immune system and nervous system and gastrointestinal system, endocrine system, than any medical doctor out there, with information that is available for free on YouTube. You can buy any book. You can buy all of my medical books, on not the ones that I wrote, but the ones that I studied, on Amazon. And so I don't think you should be delegating your child's health to the medical system and just taking a vaccine, or for that matter, seeing something, scare something on Facebook, like a story that you just mentioned. I don't think it's also right to hear one story and then say now vaccines are
Right.
terrible, because then that's alienating, another side. So I think what needs to
Absolutely.
happen globally, educational, medical, financial, all, is we just need to start asking a little bit different and a little bit better questions. And I think the first question to start off is, why would a baby need a vaccine? And so you start to look at, well, why did vaccines even start? It started with smallpox, right? And then epidemic of smallpox. Well, yeah, I think it was an epidemic. I don't know, but a big problem with smallpox going on.
Right.
And they're finding that the milkmaids weren't getting as severe cases because they were milking the cows, and they saw the cows also had small pustules on them that looked similar to smallpox. And so they figured, well, maybe they're getting natural immunity because they're getting exposed to a virus. So their immune systems were already prepared when they got exposed to the human form of smallpox. And so what I think it's Stock, right? What he did is he actually stuck a needle into the pustule of a cow, pulled the junk out, and got his son and injected it in there. And that was really how the first vaccine started, was trying to find a inoculation for smallpox. I think he injected his son a bunch of times. His son didn't actually live, very long. If you start to look at, look at now the polio, vaccine, also, an epidemic, or, whatever, where you have a fast tracked polio. If you look at what happened with polio and what's happening with COVID, it's a very eerie, similarity, where you get these scare stories of, all these people are becoming paralyzed and, all this sort of stuff. You look at the differences between when the vaccine was introduced and the decline of polio, and when the vaccine was introduced with smallpox and the decline of smallpox, we started to make huge changes in sanitary ways. We didn't really have clean water. We didn't really have a good sanitation system, or, toilets and, all of that stuff. And so as we started to learn about the immune system and germ theory and, all of that stuff, we realized, hey, if we're not like cutting somebody open with this needle, washing it off, or just going and cutting somebody open, with the same scalpel. If we clean it and sanitize it and filter our water, and don't just, sit in our poop and, all of that stuff, our body's going to be more resilient and stronger. And so when I started doing research, those are the things that I started noticing, is when they released a vaccine and they're showing the associated declines, they're not showing you the whole story of what also was changing. Is we have cleaner water, we have better food, we have better sanitation. So all those things were happening in conjunction with vaccines coming out.
Right.
But vaccines are really starting to take the forefront, and then you start to look at vaccines like chickenpox. I don't remember many people that have died from chickenpox. That was a what's the word that I'm looking for? A convenience vaccine. Parents were missing time from work because they had to stay home with their kids that have chickenpox. And so
Right.
you vaccinate your kid with chickenpox, you might not get it, and now parents can work more. But what you're not seeing is like people that got the measles. I don't remember the percentage exactly, but there's a certain percentage that if somebody got the measles, they had, it was significant, like 40 to 60, I can't remember exactly, less chance of getting ovarian cancer. And so
Wow.
we're
Didn't know
not
that.
we're not starting to see these associations, where when the body fights one disease and gains natural immunity, it also can strengthen other parts of the nervous system. But when you start influencing the nervous system unnaturally, that also is going to have different side effects. When you get, contract measles, or you contract any of these diseases, you have many different triggers of the immune system. It touches your skin, it goes through your nose, it goes through your sinus passages, it gets filtered in so many different directions before it actually starts to reach your bloodstream, in which a kind of a tertiary or fourth string immune response is initiated with, the Th1 and Th2 and immunoglobulins, the eosinophils and mast cells, and, all those other things start to be triggered at the end game, rather than
Right.
right at the beginning, which is the difference between when you have a vaccine and when you get exposed to the disease naturally. Is you get the not only the almost dead or dead, it's going straight into your bloodstream with other proteins that are in there from the chick embryo kidneys or sometimes aborted fetus cells that these viruses are grown and developed on, those proteins aren't supposed to be in the blood. They're not supposed to get from the digestive system into the blood. And
Right.
the definition of an autoimmune disease is when the body's attacking proteins in the bloodstream, it's attacking itself. And
Right.
so you start to look at leaky gut, and you start to look at immune disease, and you put together, this is all a overstimulation of the nervous system. And then you start to look at boosters. Like, where's the science on boosters? 1 year you have 3, 1 year you have 4, 1 year you have 2. There's not really, much of a congruent scientific. We're doing 72 vaccines here in America. Europe does 36. Other countries don't start until they're 2. We start from day 1. And when you start to question the science, you're not really questioning science as much as you're questioning philosophy. And so when you start asking
Well,
questions like, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to interrupt you there. When
Yeah.
you first, when we say something negative about vaccines, people tend to label us as an anti-vaxxer. You're one of those. You're an anti-vaxxer.
Right.
Well,
Right.
no, I'm actually not against vaccines completely. I am an advocate of informed consent.
Right.
For instance, when a mom gives birth, most hospitals in this nation will automatically give the baby hepatitis B vaccine the
Yeah.
first day outside the womb. And that one's a no-brainer. If you're worried about hepatitis B, that's a blood-borne virus, and they're afraid that during the birth process, the baby could get exposed if the mom has Hep B. Well, that's easy to do. A week before you're about to give birth, a couple weeks before you give birth, get tested for hepatitis B. If you're negative, there's zero reason to give your child the hepatitis B vaccine when they're born. So that's an example of getting a little education. When I went in with our 4 children, I said, we're not going to do hepatitis B. And the first thing the nurse says was, and each time they said this, all 4 times, you're not allowed to do that. I said, yes, I am. And, the law says that I can refuse that, and we're refusing that. So you have to stand up for yourself, because the medical community is not. They're going to stand up for themselves and their processes, and not necessarily for the individual. So I'm an advocate of informed consent. One of the websites that people can go to get some good information on, neutral information on this topic is the National Vaccine Information Center. It's NVIC. I don't know if it's .com or .org. I'll put that in the show notes for sure. But the National Vaccine Information Center is an excellent website. The gal who runs it, her name is Barbara Lowe Fisher, and she's very smart. She has a lot of great guest interviews on there. It's a really good place to get educated. And another place to get some knowledge is the government's own vaccine adverse event reporting system. It's called VAERS. And many people don't even know it exists, but doctors are required to report adverse events or a death following a vaccine. But they say, most people agree, that probably 90% of adverse events go unreported because the parents or the individual themselves don't even know about the reporting system. Mm-hmm. And the doctors are reluctant to report because it's a very cumbersome, time-consuming filing process. And not only that, they're documenting in writing that their care that they provided brought somebody some type of harm. So they're opening themselves up to lawsuits. So there's a number of reasons why doctors will be reluctant to even mention that, even if they do observe a vaccine adverse event. So I'm an advocate, and I think you are too, of informed consent. Get an education, and you're going to have to do it yourself. There's a lot of information available today, but you're not going to get it. You're not likely to get it from your pediatrician's office.
No. And it's interesting. You talk about, the VAERS, even if you're able to get something reported and you're seeking compensation for all the medical bills that you have, from, a potential injury, I mean, the court process is even more of a joke. I mean, it's easier to get a, return on Amazon or Costco, or, like you tell them, I have a defective car seat, or, whatever it is. It's like, oh my gosh, well, we'll do it, straight away. But it's
right.
not
We got to follow up on that
with vaccine companies.
Right.
It's very different,
Yeah. There's another point that I'd like to make before we leave this topic, and that is, in the late 80s, the vaccine manufacturers got together as an industry and went to Congress and said, hey, we're really getting really hammered with lawsuits from vaccines. And we're going to get out of the vaccine business because there's the potential to just devastate our companies financially. So as an industry, they went to Congress and said, hey, you don't want us to get out of the vaccine business because one of our enemies, our enemy nations, could attack us with a bioweapon, and we won't have the infrastructure in place to protect our citizens against it. Congress agreed, so they indemnified vaccine manufacturers from liability lawsuits. So if you get injured from a vaccine or a loved one is killed, God forbid, there's no recourse in the court system for any kind of a claim. You can't sue the manufacturer. So imagine what kind of automobiles the American manufacturers would be building if they couldn't be sued if someone was injured as a result of their negligence. We wouldn't have the safety in the automobiles that we have today if that were under that industry, over that industry. But that's what we're dealing with vaccines, and many people are not aware of that. It's something you need to know before you consent to that.
Yep, I agree completely. Because you look at, if you get the measles, or if you get, any of these, diseases that you're getting vaccines for, you can treat almost all of them pretty easily with emergency medical care. Like that's where I believe medicine is at its best, that you have something that your body is having trouble fighting. Here is something to help get your body over it. You can't really say the same. Like you said, if you get injured from a pharmaceutical, there's no really easy way out of it.
Right. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit, Dr. Chris. You've got a book coming out. It's called Rewire Your Brain for Success and Abundance. Talk to us about your book.
Yeah. So the main title is Perspective, and then the subtitle is Rewire Your Brain for Success and Abundance. The Lord spoke to me. We did a lot of thinking in COVID because there's nothing else to do, right? Which was a blessing. And he kind of just told me, like, it's time to write a book. And I was reluctant. I didn't want to do it. I'm not somebody that likes to sit down and just write. And so he kind of just kept on bringing resources of people that were going to help me, write this book. I originally wanted to write it on communication. And when I told, my scribe, someone that was going to help me write it, she's like, I don't think that's a book that you want to write, but I have a passion for communicating in a way that makes sense to other people, rather than just saying what you want to say and hoping people catch on, but saying things in a way that is intentionally trying to help people understand. And she's like, your story as a chiropractor, as an entrepreneur, the philosophy that you have, I think is more important to get out there. And so that's kind of what, at the root, what it's about. It combines my experience, everything that we talked about in the beginning as a chiropractor, with what I've learned as an entrepreneur, with the principles that I've learned as a regenerative farmer, and kind of just put it all into one, where here are some principles of life that if you follow, you will be able to live a life healthy, with vision, purpose, within core values. You'll be able to goals. And ultimately, what I talk about at the end is you'll be able to be a more creative human, which opinion is one of the most lacking things of Christians in today's day and age, but should be the most important things and outspoken things of a Christian. Because, the Bible talks created in his image. The first image that we have of him is creator. And that aren't creative are most likely living in a state of stress and scarcity. And so they're only worried about themselves, which means that they can't be on mission making disciples because they're just worried about how to make their life, work together. And so if we can make you, or if we can help you live a healthier life and transform your neurology from a state of stress into a state of ease, that will give you a possibility to look deeper into the future, so you can set a vision for what you want for your family. Husbands and wives can lead their family. Husbands can be the headship of their family and lead them in a way that's not just paying bills, hoping for retirement one day. You can develop a purpose that's bigger than yourself, so you have a legacy to leave for your kids and grandkids after that. You're able to set core values. You're not distracted when the new thing comes out, or with the new fear, or the new variant, or whatever. You have some things that are kind of like guardrails to keep you on mission, on purpose. And then you can start setting goals, so that way you can track your progress along the way, instead of just going round and round chasing your tail and never really making progress. So that's what I hope the book does. I hope it empowers CEOs that are stuck, that were originally passionate and excited about their job and now are just indifferent. I hope it empowers moms that want to start their own business, or dads that want to start their own business that don't like their job but don't know how, to enable them to embark on the journey of entrepreneurship strategically, not just like quitting their job and going full bore and having to deal with, burnout and failure and those sort of things. And I hope it teaches people more about Christ and ultimately how we can represent him well as Christians, empowered by the Holy Spirit, living excellent, optimal lives instead of,
Yeah.
settling for mediocre, whatever life happens to me.
I love it, Chris. A lot of what you said, I had those exact same thoughts when I wrote my book, The Christian's Guide to Holistic Health. By the way, it's right there. Christian's Guide to Holistic Health. So yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I got into natural and holistic health to begin with was I took a look around my friends and my family and the people that go to my church, and I said, I don't know if I see a lot of people really living the abundant life. How many people do I know that have actually discovered their calling and are walking in that on a daily basis? It's very rare. And I really believe that that's not the way things are supposed to be. That's not God's original design. Ephesians 2:10 says, we are created for good works that God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. We are his workmanship. So God wouldn't prepare us for good works without empowering us. And when we're distracted with a health concern, if it's back pain or whatever it is, brain fog, we become a little more inward focused. We become a little more self-centered, and we have less energy motivation to serve others. So we need to take care of ourselves. It's not selfish to do a little self-love and do a little self-care, because when we're more rested, we have more energy motivation to serve others, we become better people. And it sounds to me like that message is on your heart as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it comes from, my childhood growing up. It comes from just all these, different Christians that I see in my practice that are just kind of living as drones,
Yeah.
rather than living as, heirs of the kingdom of Christ.
Yes. Yeah. Very good. So as we wrap things up, Dr. Chris, can you give the Natural Nation, the listeners, a little bit of low-hanging fruit, something you would share with almost all of your clients before they leave your office, something they can implement right away for a quick win?
Yeah, great question. I think the number one thing that I would like my patients to leave with is your body needs to be adaptable. The more stress you have, the less adaptable you become. So you need to find outlets for your stress, which is why most chiropractors and holistic people in general recommend regular movement. Movement is what keeps the blood flowing, it keeps people's spinal fluid flowing. And so people that are, probably listening to this podcast are probably commuting to work. So find ways that you can move in your car, doing simple, back exercises. I taught like the wave movement with your back, keeping things moving. If you're listening to it from home, you have a home office, making sure you're continuing to change your stance from sitting to maybe sitting on an exercise ball to standing, taking walks every once in a while. Making sure that your body is continually moving, I think, is the most important thing. Same thing for our kids, making sure if they come home from school, they're not directly doing homework right away and continuing to sit for, hours on it, but they get a chance to go move and wiggle. Movement is one of the most important and one of the most neglected things, I think, in society today, really since COVID too. You hear the COVID-15 and whatnot, because people are just stagnant, not moving. And so along with those New Year's resolutions, to go to the gym and, all that stuff, movement is the most important thing. You don't need to wreck your body. You don't need to do some crazy CrossFit-like workout. Movement, you can get on the treadmill, you can get on elliptical, you can get on a bike, get on a row machine. All those things are really, really important. Just keep moving as much as you can, and that's going to, really do wonders for your health.
Excellent. So not only the gym a couple of times a week for 30 minutes, but movement every day. Do some walking, do some, park at the worst spot in the parking lot and walk into the store instead of trying to look for the best spot. There's little things you can do to incorporate movement throughout the day. I love it. It's good stuff. All right. What's the best way to get a hold of you? If someone wants to talk with you and talk to you more about your practice, what's the best way to get a hold of you, Dr. Chris?
Sure. I'm super active on Instagram. My practice page is Trailhead Chiro. My personal page is Dr. Chris Boman, no W in Boman. My website is coming live. If you go to, perspectivethebook.com, you can be, and you get on the waiting list to pre-order. Book comes out February 16th. You will be entered to win a all-inclusive 4-day wellness retreat out here in my hometown, Temecula, in an afternoon with me, and an iPad mini, and $1,000 towards travel, to get here. So I'm trying to get the word out that, just join my wait list to get that book, and you can have a transformational weekend out here at the end
So
of February.
Everybody that joins the wait list is entered into the drawing?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sign me up.
Yep. Perfect. Yep. Perspective, the book, just enter your name and email there. And yeah. And then when you enter your email too, there's tons of value that's going to be coming your way with different interviews and whatnot that I've done with some high profile people. So not only is it worth it for the wellness retreat, but also for the information that you'll get in those following emails.
And you have a YouTube channel as well, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's that called?
It's just Dr. Chris Boman. Yeah, it's just Dr. Chris Boman. If you search my name on YouTube, I'll come up. That's where my podcast is. My podcast is called The Healthy Perspective. Very similar, to David's, where we just bring people on to find different perspectives on life and how they become successful.
All right, very good. Dr. Chris, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with the Natural Nation. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
For more, go to the show notes page at davidsandstrom.com/81. There you can find audio as well as video versions of the podcast. We always put links to all the resources that we mentioned, as well as a free downloadable transcript and some type of a content upgrade. As always, thank you for listening, and I'll talk with you next week. Be blessed.